Have you ever worked a crappy job? If you're like me, then the answer is most likely yes. But hey, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. And working a crappy job is a great way to pay the bills while figuring out what you want to do with your life, right? But what happens when you meet an interesting person while working your crappy job? Do you try to get to know them, or do you keep your interactions brief and professional? Well, let me tell you about a tale of a girl named Cadence who worked a dive bar in a small town. My name is Cadence. I work the closing shift at a small dive bar in the quieter part of my town. The place is right off the highway, but the parking lot also has a back entrance that's available to the general town. It's nothing fancy, just a dimly lit spot where the regulars know each other by name, and the jukebox has been playing the same rotation of classic rock for years. Most of our customers are locals, truckers passing through, and the occasional lost tourist looking for a stiff drink. I like it, though. The routine is predictable. The tips are surprisingly decent, and I've learned how to handle the usual bar crowd, the talkers, the flirts, the quiet drinkers, and the ones who just want to be left alone. Weekends are obviously a lot more hectic, but the thing about working during the week is that I'm expected to work my night shifts alone. I don't even get a bar back to pop in now and again. Yeah, it's obviously easier work and slower during the week, but I miss the company of my coworkers. I tend to be pretty vigilant during my shifts because we do get the occasional bar fight. Considering the kinds of crowds we attract, that's why I clocked the guy immediately. It was sometime after 1 out in the morning on a Tuesday when he walked in. If I had to guess, I'd say he was in his late 40s, but he was extremely clean-cut and well-groomed. Not the kind of looking you'd expect from a guy his age in an area like this. He was wearing a black turtleneck underneath a black trench coat. Definitely well-dressed, but casual about it. I'm not sure how to explain it, but he had this aura of sophistication about him that makes you think of money. Real money, not the loud, look-at-me kind. He glanced around slowly before walking swiftly over to the bar and taking a seat. I also remember him having oddly good posture, but that's neither here nor there. When I walked over, he glanced at the bottles behind me and ordered something top shelf without hesitation. As I was pouring his drink, he asked me if I liked working here with a smile on his face. It was a normal enough question, so I answered him honestly. I told him, yeah, and smiled back. Then he did something that made me feel a little uneasy. He leaned in close, real close, and said, "Good, because I need someone to talk to." I froze as I tried to process what he meant. Was he trying to strike up a conversation, or was this a threat? Before I could respond, my eyes met his. And, oh man, those eyes, they were like two pools of darkness, intense and unwavering. They seemed to pierce through me, through my facade, through everything I had carefully constructed to protect myself. In that moment, I felt exposed, vulnerable. Why was he staring at me like that? What did he want? My mind raced, trying to come up with a quick response, but all I could manage was a weak, sure. His lips curled into a knowing smile, and he leaned back, taking a slow sip of his drink. "Excellent," he said, his voice a low growl. "Excellent." And with that, he stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair in the process, and walked towards the jukebox. As I watched him walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger. But why? What had I done to deserve this? Or maybe the better question was, what had he done to deserve me? This happened a while ago. I was working as a bartender in a pretty upscale place. It was the type of bar that didn't really attract much of a crowd after 10 p.m. unless there was some sort of special event going on. One such night, I was closing up around 11 p.m. when a man in his mid-30s came in. He sat down at the end of the bar and struck up a conversation with me. I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. He reminded me of the type of guy who'd stick around a little too long at a kid's birthday party, the type who'd ask a bunch of inappropriate questions to the birthday girl and give her a weird hug goodbye. Something about him just felt off. But then again, maybe it was just the isolation of being the only person in the bar with a near-empty dance floor and a giant chandelier looming above us. I did my best to keep things polite, I even made a joke about being a bartender or something. I wish I could say I got a creepy vibe from him, but that's not the energy he was giving off. He genuinely seemed like a stand-up guy, kind of like the single dad at his kid's baseball game that gives the whole team a high five. He chatted with me for a bit, which I didn't mind since the bar was pretty quiet at that point. Eventually, he asked me if I ever thought about doing something bigger, which I admit was somewhat bizarre. Again, though, not a totally creepy question given the nature of the situation. I gave him my standard bartender smile and told him I was happy for now. He nodded and sipped his drink, seemingly disappointed at my answer for reasons I didn't understand. After a long pause, he asked me what time I got off out of nowhere. That question surprised me. I hadn't picked up any kind of flirting from him whatsoever. So I was a little disappointed to discover that our conversation had just been another one of those empty attempts at getting my number. I smiled and gave him a vague answer, trying to brush him off in a friendly way without seeming uptight. Before he could answer, I busied myself and began wiping down the counter, but he didn't press. He just smiled like he already knew. Then drained his drink and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, laying it gently on the bar like it was nothing. Then, without another word, he walked out into the night. I didn't really know what to make of the encounter. I know it sounds like nothing, but his demeanor was just so far off my radar that I was intrigued. Either way, I figured I was never going to see him again and got on with my life as it would turn out, though I was wrong. A week later, he came back, only this time he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him. She drew my attention since I hadn't seen her before. She looked like she was in her mid-30s and was dressed in a way that didn't quite match her age trendy, but off like someone trying a little too hard to blend in with a younger crowd. I watched her closely as the two of them approached the bar. Everything about her seemed calculated from the way she... My first thought was that maybe it was for me, but then I remembered I was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie and my hair was a mess. I looked like I just rolled out of bed, so I must have looked pretty if she thought I was a celebrity. She continued explaining that it was a really big event and she wanted me to come work for them for the night. She said she needed some experienced bartenders and I could make a lot of money. I declined politely, telling her I couldn't leave my post, and she pressed, telling me I could go as long as I poured drinks for them first. I still refused, and she dropped the act, flashing me a fake ID that read, April Fools. I burst out laughing, feeling humiliated that I'd fallen for it. She apologized profusely, saying she couldn't believe I didn't buy it. But I was actually impressed. She was so convincing. If she wanted to be a bartender, she could totally do it. I asked her what she was doing here if she wasn't going to try to get me to come to this event with her. And she admitted that she was actually here to scout out new talent for her company. She explained that she owned a chain of restaurants and bars and that she was looking for people to work at her newest location. I told her I was flattered, but I loved my current job and had no plans of leaving. She nodded understandingly, saying that she could tell I was a hard worker. And I blushed because I guess that was true. We chatted for a bit more about random things before she finally left, promising to keep in touch. The whole interaction left me feeling a little uneasy. It was weird that she kept glancing over at the man who didn't say a word the entire time. And it was strange that she seemed so interested in me, but only after I poured them their drinks. It felt like she was sizing me up, like I was a product on a shelf and she was trying to find something wrong with me. But maybe I was reading into it too much. Maybe she just liked the way I poured. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today I will be reading from a subreddit. So let's jump into it. Am I the asshole for refusing to go to a party with my boss and his friends? My boss at the time was a guy in his mid-40s. One day during my shift, he excused himself to go to the restroom. When he came back, he sat down next to me and asked me out of the blue, "Are you on Snapchat?" Confused, I told him I wasn't and asked why. He said it was nothing. Then he went back to work. A few minutes later, he leaned in a bit as he said it, lowering his voice as if to prevent him being overheard by another patron. He told me that he's always looking for young, fun people for private parties and that I'd make a killing, 10 grand for a weekend. I let out a small, forced laugh and told him it sounded too good to be true. He insisted that it was real and told me that a bunch of girls like me worked for them. His smile never falls altered at any moment, which was starting to creep me out. He steered the conversation back to the job, circling around the same words: fun, safe, exclusive. Then, casually, he said, "You should step outside for a second. There's someone who can explain it better." My pulse kicked up. I wasn't playing around at that point. I didn't even bother pretending like I wasn't creeped out. "I'm good," I said in a firm voice, no smile on my face. This time, just then, a group of customers walked in laughing and talking loudly. The woman's expression changed in an instant, her friendly mask slipping just slightly before she turned to the man beside her without another word. They left. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't unsettled after that. Those random people had just propositioned me for God knows what. I told my coworkers and my boss about the situation, and we all agreed to keep an eye out should those people return. My boss assured me that he was always a 15-minute drive away should I need him, and the bar security cameras were typically enough to deter any misbehavior. There wasn't really much I could do beyond that. It's not like those people had done anything illegal. I tried to push it out of my head, but a few. My boss was making his way over, so I quickly slid onto a stool next to me. "Hey," he said loudly, leaning in close. "You know her from somewhere." I shook my head, trying to be subtle. "No, I don't. I'm sorry. It's pretty obvious that I don't know her, right? Like I should just kick her out." He nodded knowingly. "Yeah, you should probably do that," I mouthed him. "Thank you," and he headed to the other side of the bar to get her drink. The whole time she kept looking at me. Once he walked away, she finally broke her eerie silence. "So, you didn't recognize me before." She leaned in, her eyes boring into mine. "I don't think I've ever seen you here before." She flashed that fake smile again. "Oh, I just moved here from LA. You know, California." I nodded, suddenly feeling very claustrophobic. The bell above the door chimed and my boss walked back over, placing a drink in front of her. "Here you go." She thanked him, and he walked away. As soon as he did, she took a large gulp of her drink. "So," she started, "do you have any fun plans for the weekend?" My mind raced. Was this some kind of trap? Why was she still here? Was she following me? My boss must have read my face because he came and stood beside me, subtly blocking me in. No plans yet," I managed to say, my voice shaking slightly. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Well, maybe you could hang out with me and my friends. We're having a little get-together." My boss cleared his throat awkwardly. Yeah, maybe another time?" She took another drink, this time lingering her lips on the glass. "Suit yourself." She stood up, brushing off her dress. "Well, it was nice seeing you again." She walked towards the door, pausing as she heard my boss ask, "Are you sure you're okay?" She stopped at the door and slowly turned around. "Of course I am," she said sweetly. "Just making sure," she added with a wink. Then she stepped outside, leaving us in stunned silence. As soon as the door closed, my boss let out a breath he was clearly holding. "What the hell was that?" I whispered frantically. "I don't know," he replied, equally as shaken. "But I think I might have just saved your life." "What the hell?" It was 8 a.m. and I was working the overnight shift at my boss's restaurant. We were a little understaffed, so my boss asked if I could stay open and close. No problem, right? Little did I know it was going to be a very long day. About 6 hours into my shift, I heard footsteps inside the restaurant. I assumed it was my boss since he had a key. So I was kind of surprised when I turned around and saw a woman standing there. She was holding a cup of what looked like water. "Can I help you?" I asked. "I don't mean to be rude, but this is a private residence." She took a sip of her drink and replied, "Oh, don't worry. I'm not here to cause any trouble. I just need to use the phone. Would you mind if I waited here for a bit?" I wanted to say no, but something about her tone made me feel bad. So I poured her a glass of water and went back to work. But I figured pouring the drink would stall her long enough for my boss to arrive. So I turned around and got started. Trying to keep my cool, I heard it. The soft, unmistakable click of the front door shutting. I whipped around. The woman was gone. I felt this awful pit in my stomach as I stepped toward the entrance. Through the glass, I saw it, a black van idling just outside. Without thinking, I locked the door as quickly as I could, but then metal rattling from the back door. Someone was trying to get in. I didn't think. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could, a metal shaker, and clutched it like a weapon as I dialed 911 with my other hand. There was no way the police would get there in time. So I thought about making a run for it out the front door, but I didn't. For whatever reason, I was bracing myself for a fight. When I saw headlights pulling into the lot, it was my boss. Relief washed over me. I embraced him and told him what had happened. He said he had gotten the license plate of the van as it was leaving. When the cops arrived, my boss reviewed the security footage with them. It was worse than I'd imagined. Just before the woman left, the cameras had captured two masked figures crouching near the front door, waiting. There was another person in the back who was banging on the door with his fist, clearly trying to flush me out to the front. It was downright horrifying. To make matters worse, the plate number my boss had caught turned out to be unregistered. It's been quite a while, but I still get the creeps whenever I think about that day. What would you have done? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. I remember it vividly. It was just past 2:30 in the morning. By then, even the truckers had dried up and I was left with basically nothing to do. I scrolled mindlessly on my phone, trying to kill some time. At one point, I stepped outside for some air. Rubbing my hands together against the cold, I exhaled a few times, watching my breath disappear in the cold. The parking lot was empty, just the pumps, the road, and the dark stretch of trees beyond the neon sign. It flickered faintly, and I remember it being hazy out there. You could literally see the moisture in the air. Even with the highway not too far off, it was pretty silent out there. Right as I was about to walk back towards the store, I noticed something move out of the corner of my eye. I whipped my head around and realized it was a guy. He was tall and skinny, lanky limbs and wild, scraggly hair. I couldn't see his face, though. He was too far away and shrouded in the haze, but as he started walking closer, I could see his eyes. They were wild, manic even. And I remember thinking, okay, here we go. I slowly backed away from him, keeping my eyes locked on his, trying to figure out what he wanted. Was it money? Should I open the till for him? What if he wanted me to come outside? My heart started racing. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I don't remember much after that. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on the floor with my back against the cooler, hugging my knees to my chest. I don't know how long I was out like that, but eventually I got up and went to the bathroom to splash some water on my face. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw that my hands were shaking. I tried to steady them on the counter, but it was no use. That's when I knew I wasn't going to be able to finish my shift. I called my boss and told him I wasn't feeling well and that I needed to go home. He didn't ask any questions. Thank God. Since that incident, though, no progress has been made. The only good news to come out of the whole thing is that my boss doesn't make me work alone anymore. Despite that, I'm still extremely uneasy anytime I'm scheduled for a night shift. I still question how they knew I'd be working alone. It doesn't make any sense even now. I often think about what would have happened had I given in to fear and run out the front door. Would he have followed me? Would I have made it to the highway? Would someone have stopped and helped me? Would I even be alive? I don't know. Maybe. But one thing's for certain. I never should have ignored those butterflies in my stomach that night. There was a person standing behind one of the pumps. How had I not noticed him earlier? He was wearing a dark red hoodie with a hood up, and he had both hands shoved in his pockets. There wasn't a car in sight, so he obviously wasn't fueling up. The only thing was, he didn't seem to be heading towards the store either. He was just standing there, half turned toward the store like he was watching me. At first, I figured maybe he was waiting for someone, but something about the way he moved rubbed me the wrong way. He was kind of shuffling about in this circular pattern. So I entered the store, but made sure to keep an eye on him through the glass. I kept track of him while pretending not to, hoping someone would drive up and pick him up or something, but after a few minutes he started walking toward the door. Slow at first, then suddenly pushing inside like he made up his mind all at once. He walked up to the counter but didn't say anything right away, just stared at me like he was sizing me up. Then, in a rushed, almost rehearsed way, he muttered that his car had broken down just before the pumps. He said he needed a jump, or maybe just a little gas to get to the next town. I offered to call a tow truck instead. No, he said too quick, shaking his head. He just needed a flashlight. Maybe some help checking under the hood. Something was definitely off. That much was true. The way he spoke, the way he watched my reaction, it felt like a test. To be fair, I was working the night shift at a gas station in a small town, and it was 3 a.m. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see a man in his mid-30s walking in. He was dressed well, almost too well. He looked like he had just stepped out of a car commercial. But what really caught my attention was his desperation. He wasn't the type of person you'd expect to see rushing into a gas station at that hour. People walking into gas stations at that hour are usually a little strange, and I started wondering whether he actually needed help and was just an odd person or on something. He approached the counter and asked for change for $1. I gave him 4 quarters and he thanked me profusely. I noticed he was kind of fidgety, shifting from foot to foot and constantly glancing around. It was weird. So I asked him where his car was parked, and he told me it was just beyond the highway entrance. I was obviously skeptical, but then he pointed at the monitor behind me. I turned to look at the screen, and to my surprise, there actually was a car parked out there. I thought to myself, oh crap, maybe this guy really does need help. And that's when it hit me. I had literally just been outside, and I would have remembered a car parked out there. I glanced back at the monitor and saw the slightest movement near the car's back bumper. Someone was crouching just out of view. A cold wave of dread hit me. I forced a casual smile and agreed to help the guy, but not before telling him I needed to grab my phone from the back office. He nodded frantically, eyes wide with what I assumed was gratitude. The second I was out of his direct sight, I slammed my hand onto the emergency panic button under the counter. The alarm went off instantly, screeching through the store. I expected him to attack me, but what he did instead was even more unsettling. His nervous energy disappeared. No more fake urgency. No more shifting from foot to foot. He actually relaxed. His whole body language shifted, and then he smiled. Not a panicked smile, not an embarrassed one, but a slow, knowing grin like he had all the time in the world. Like this was amusing to him. I was in shock. I didn't even have time to get physical with him. In one fluid motion, he turned and bolted. I ran to the monitors just in time to see him disappear into the car. I quickly called the police and told them what had happened. They arrived quickly, but by then he was gone. To this day, I still wonder who that man was and what his game was. To buy electronics, right? It was about 2 a.m., and I was finishing up some paperwork when I heard the door to the back stockroom open and close. I didn't think anything of it until a minute or two later when I heard what sounded like screams in the parking lot. Big, guttural screams. I got up to go see what was going on. As I rounded the corner, I saw 2 men sprinting away from the store. They were both shirtless, and one of them had a pair of scissors in his hand. I couldn't tell if they were running towards or away from the car. They both took off not towards the car but into the woods behind the station. The car just sat there, engine off, headlights off, no one inside. By the time the police arrived, it was exactly as I saw it. The car was still there, but the men were gone. No footprints leading away, no sign of them anywhere. And then one of the officers pointed something out, something I hadn't noticed before. The front passenger door was open. There had been a third person inside the whole time. The police took my statement down. I turned over the surveillance footage, and that was that. A few days later, they followed up with me. They had the car towed and ran the plates. Turned out it had been reported stolen nearly a week earlier, more than 100 miles away. No one had come forward to claim it. There were no reports of missing persons. There were no other crimes linked to it. Just an abandoned vehicle in the middle of nowhere with no explanation. That was months ago, and still nothing. I don't know why convenience stores are such popular targets, but I can say for sure that I will never work another night shift again. Thanks for listening. I was working the night shift at a big box store, and we had just gotten a shipment of phone chargers and Bluetooth speakers. Most of the customers that came in at this hour were either night owls killing time or truckers grabbing last-minute supplies before heading back on the road. That's why I didn't think much of him at first. Just another guy wandering the aisles, probably waiting for someone. But after a few minutes I realized he wasn't shopping. He wasn't even pretending to. He kept appearing every time I glanced up. He was lingering nearby, hovering in the next over, standing a little too still by the clearance section. He wasn't looking at anything. He was just standing there watching me. I told myself I was overthinking it. The store is big and maybe he was just taking his time. But the way he moved, always just close enough for me to notice, never actually picking anything up. It set something deep in my gut on edge. I was waiting for him to just get on with it and ask for my number, but he never approached me. It was like he wanted me to see him, which didn't make any sense to me. I went to radio someone about it, but realized that the batteries in my radio must have been dead because it wasn't working. Eventually, I started debating whether I should go find a manager when I felt a hand wrap around my arm. I nearly jumped out of my skin. But before I could react, a woman's voice rang out. Loud, friendly, overly familiar. She exclaims, "There you are," before going on a little spiel about how she had been looking all over for me. I turned completely thrown off and saw a woman I had never seen before in my life. She was smiling, her grip firm on my arm like we were old friends.